G'day guys, I've just returned from the Australian ITC Championships where I took home Best in Faction for Chaos Space Marines. So what I wanted to do was release a 9-part series where I'm going to break down the list that I ran to this event to achieve these results with the new changes that are forced upon the Chaos Space Marine players by Arcs of Omen. I'm going to talk about what changes I made to the list to match this new season and how I went about it, what the list was designed to do, those sorts of things. Then I'm going to do a separate installment for each game that we played in this 8-round ITC major event. And basically I'm going to talk about the list that my opponent ran, the results that we got during the game, and the various strategies and situations that led to those results being achieved. So this will be similar to the Men's Masquerade series that I did after I won that GT, but much longer and hopefully much more interesting in a lot of detail. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into the video.
Welcome to the Black God.
G'day guys, welcome to this 6th installment on my Arcs of Omen, Black Legion, Australian ITC Championships, Best in Faction Chaos Space Marines series. I desperately need to find a way to make that shorter. Anyway, in today's installment we're going to be talking about my 5th round, and we're going to be talking about the list that I versed, the scores that were achieved, and strategies that resulted in those scores. If you haven't seen the first installment yet, I highly recommend you go back and watch that one first, because in that one I break down my list in great detail, and the tactics and strategies, the warlord traits and relics, all of the stuff that I've built into my list in the first installment. In this installment, we're going to be talking about my opponent's list from this round, the scores, and the strategies that resulted in those scores. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into the list. Alright, so I versed Jack Lavacombe and his Dark Eldar. So he had an Arcs of Omen detachment, which was a Obsession, Cult of Red Grief, and the Speed of the Kill. Then, being Drukhari, he also had an allied patrol detachment with the Cabal of the Black Heart, Thirst for Power. Alright, so let's look at his units. He had Drazar, who had Hatred Eternal and was the Warlord. He had a Succubus with Adrenalite, it was Dancer's Edge, Quicksilver Fighter, Agonizer, Archite Glaive, and Showstealer Red Grief. There was a Succubus who had Hypex Combat Drugs. It had the Triptych Whip Agonizer and Archite Glaive. There was a unit of Corsair Void Reavers with Shuriken Cannon, 2 Void Scarred with Shredders, 6 Void Reavers with Shuriken Pistol and Eldari Power Sword, and a Void Reaver Felark Shuriken Rifle. Don't ask me what that is, but he had one. Then he had basically had a bunch of units of Witches. So he had 3 units of 5 here with just the Hekatari Blades, the standard sort of loadout. Then he had another bigger unit that was a unit of 9, and they had a Shardnet and an Impaler and Power Swords in the unit. Then he had a Beast Master, which had Hypex Agonizer. He had 3 units of 5 Incubi, each with 5 Claves. He had a unit of Hellions with Adrenalite. He had a Heliarch, a Hellglaive, 5 Hellions, 5 Hellglaves, and Splinter Pods. Then he had 2 identical units of Reavers, 2 units of 2, or 3 I think they are. They're 3 units of 3 because there's the Champion and the 2 Reavers. Then he had 2 identical Venoms, so the Splinter Cannons and Twin Splinter Rifles on those. It was actually 4 Venoms, sorry, not 2. And then he had 2 Raiders, so 2 identical units of Raiders. One of them had a Dark Lance with Splinter Axe, and the other had just a Dark Lance. Sorry, his list was so long, trying to fit it on one screen was a challenge in itself. He also had the Court of the Archon. This was in the Black Heart detachment. So he had the Court of the Archon with 4 Slith and 4 Urgles. He had an Archon himself with Ancient Evil, an Overlord, Power Sword, and a Blast Pistol. And then he had a unit of Cabalite Warriors with just Splinter Rifles, etc. Alright, so This list was as hard to understand on the day as it is now, having already versed it and tried to rewrite it and digest it in a format that's going to fit on a screen. It's just so many freaking units. He had tons of trading pieces. And that's one thing that my army traditionally struggles with, is when people are able to throw out a 60-point unit or a 50-point unit, to steal an objective from me. And it's like, now I need to take one of my multiple 100-point units to go back and deal with that unit, which allows my opponent to really pick me apart. And this game really did feel like a traditional Dark Eldar versus Chaos Space Marine list, and how you would imagine it unfolding in the lore, because you basically got these big chunky units of mine versus all these little zippy fast units of his flying around doing chip damage to me and just being annoying, like I was trying to swat away flies. So let's have a look at the scoreboard, break that down, and then we'll talk about some of the specifically notable moments from the game. All right, so I got an 88-point win to Jack's 84-point loss. So as you can see, a very, very close game. So primary-wise, I got 32 points and I got 14 points for the sub-primary. I used Warp Ritual, for which I got 12 points, Grind Them Down, for which I got 15, Raise the Banners High, for which I got 6, and giving me a total, including Battle Ready, of 88. Whereas Jack got a 28-point primary, 13 for the sub-primary, 9 points for Take Them Alive, 15 points for Behind Enemy Lines, 9 points for Raise the Banners High, giving him 84 points total, including his Battle Ready. Alright, so this was a very interesting game. Basically, I got the first turn and teleported up into the center of the table, where I was able to do my Warp Ritual and basically just sit there, knowing that he has no way, he effectively had no shooting in his army, and if he wanted to try and engage me in combat, he was going to have to send multiple units in. Then I would basically use my Mark of Slaanesh to always fight first. So after he fights with his first 5-man unit, I would get to fight, and I would just kill all of the rest. So I knew that that Terminator unit was nigh unkillable in this matchup. So I basically threw it into the center of the table and sat there, did my Warp Ritual, and protected all my characters. Because I knew that the one thing that he would be able to do is send in a 5-man unit to assassinate characters and try to dig them out. So I basically had to bubble wrap them and keep them safe until my Warp Ritual was finished, and then I could fan out. And then basically my plan was to just pick him off piece by piece and get those Grind Them Down points. And this plan more or less worked. He basically kept sending things onto my flanks, holding objectives, trying to deny my primary, which he was doing very, very well. He also put a few units witches on that central objective outside of my heroic intervention range, but on so that he was able to deny my primary, take my banners down, those sorts of things. So he played a very, very tight game. But after he sort of started to fan out and started to slowly bleed him of his resources, because he had to keep sending them out, then the Terminators would shoot them down, the Decimators and the Heckbrutes would come on and blast things, he'd have to send out more units, so I was slowly bleeding him of units. When he got to a point where I felt like he was now pretty much exhausted, I then sent the Terminators out, put Advance and Charge on him, chased after Drazar, chased after the Incubi, and just basically wiped the floor with all of his units, to the point where we got to round 5, final round, and I killed his Court of the Archon, finishing the game. It was, however, quite close when you look at the scoreboards. And that's really interesting. He basically had some decent secondary choices. Some of my secondary choices were maybe not so great. And there was also a few clutch moments where I made some pretty critical mistakes in the game. So one of them was I started killing him really, really fast. And then I was worried that what was going to happen is I was going to run out of eligible units to kill, and therefore run out of ability to score Grind Them Down. So there was a few instances where I've left a unit of 1 witch alive, because I'm like, I don't want to kill her now. I could easily kill her. I got a Hellbrute standing right next to her. I could very easily just heavy flame her dead, or charge her dead, or whatever. But I'm like, I actually don't want to kill her this turn, because that hurts my ability to get Grind Them Down next turn. So I'm like, I'll leave her alive. Then he just goes, cool, advancing over onto that objective, denying your primary, taking down your banner. And I was like, fuck, I should have just killed the bitch. So there was a few mistakes that I made like that caused big swings in the victory points. That was a several point swing, because he took down my primary, he took down my banner, and he also now had this unit in combat with my cultists, doing damage. So that was really, really bad on my side. But there were some interesting things as well. One of them is I basically got the Terminators engaged in combat with his Archon and a couple of other units. I put all of my combat into the Archon, killed him. Then he's fallen back with his other units, knowing that the Terminators would strike first in his turn and kill him. So he's fallen back with those units, and I've spent 2 CP, and instead of chasing them down, I've used the Slanesh stratagem to shoot those units, and I've killed them before they could get away, which means they weren't able to take objectives off me, they weren't able to engage with me in any way, because they were dead. Yeah, that was a really, really good trick. That worked really well. So there was some good tricks that I did, there was some sneaky stuff, but there was also some big mistakes made on my half. So one of the lessons that I've learned there is that basically if you are in a situation where you're deciding to leave something alive because you don't want to kill it yet because you want to worry about your score, you need to take a step back and think about what your opponent wants you to do. You know, think about what your opponent could be thinking with that unit. Does your opponent want you to kill it, or does your opponent want to still have it alive? And trying to get your mind into the mindset of your opponent to try to understand their decisions will help you when you're making your own decisions. So that was a really interesting takeaway and something that I needed to remind myself of from this game. But yeah, other than that, it was an absolute ripper of a game. Jack's an absolute legend of a bloke as well, so I always have good games with him. He's actually the captain of the Canberra team for the Australian-New Zealand Team Championships, and I'm the captain of the Victorian team for that same event. So it was really interesting. We had a captain versus captains showdown, and I was able to just edge him out and just come out on top. So that's a big win for me, a big win for Victoria. I've now got the skull of the captain of an enemy state on the mantle behind me. So really happy with that. And yeah, had a sick time. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all that good shit. Let me know what you think. And make sure you head over to our Patreon and show your support over there. You can pick up apparel like this. You can pick up neoprene objective markers, those sorts of things. And we're also doing a monthly giveaway. This month, we're giving away a 3D printed Angron. All you have to do is join the Patreon to automatically get entered into that. And the plan is to have him in your hands before the World Leaders Codex even hits the shelves. So I've got the model with me right here. It's about ready to be posted. And that means you'll be able to build it and paint it before the Codex is in your hands, which means when you do get that Codex, you'll be able to hit the ground running and get games in straight away with Angron, the Bloody Red Angel. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.
Welcome to the Black God.